Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company at Watches and Wonders 2025. We're here with Parmigiani Fleurier and CEO Guido Tereni. He's been in the watch industry since 2000, CEO at Parmigiani Fleurier since 2021, and he has led a revitalization of the brand. We're going to talk about his philosophy, his approach, a little bit about the company, and this year's novelties. Sir, welcome to the show.
Hello, Tim. Welcome.
So this is really cool. So let's start with when you joined Parmigiani Fleurier in 2021. What were your objectives out of the gate? Because this was just coming out of the COVID era, early days.
It was a very peculiar moment, and the brand, it was not a secret that wasn't in a good position. And the mandate was to clarify its positioning and to try to make it blossom and get it back to the original prestige. And this is what we did. The pandemic helped us, paradoxically, in doing an introspective work. And the question was, who was that client that in the late 90s made the brand so prestigious when Michel, the founder, Michel Parmigiani, founded it? And what would he be wearing in today's world? And the response was to design the Tonda PF Collection that hit the market in only 7 months, and this was possible because of the pandemic. It would have taken probably 15, 18 months to do it now, and the response was very, very strong.
And that was right after the introduction of what at the time was like the Tonda GT and the first foray into sports watches.
That was the predecessor of the PF, but the PF brought the higher level of watchmaking content, only explicit movements and finishing and a style which was extremely pure. What we did is to look into the aesthetic codes of the brand and see what was in the heritage of the brand, and everybody reacted as, oh, it's so fresh, it's so new, but it's also so Parmigiani, because we played with the ingredients that the brand had built in 25 years. The first of which is the logo, where you take away the lettering, that you see this beautiful ellipse with the PF inside, which was a way to show that this is a private luxury. This is for people who have passed that tipping point in understanding that what is really cool is not what others are asking you to buy, but what you want to buy, and that is who we are serving.
In other words, it's the guy who's got enough confidence not to be a brand snob. That's sort of your Parmigiani customer. Let's talk a little bit about the structure of the company and a bit about its history, and then we'll circle back around to the new products. But a lot of people have difficulty understanding how this company is structured, because it features at least 5 almost completely independent businesses that also do work for others in the industry. And for a long time you've been associated with the Sandoz family, which has sort of been like a patron of the arts. So explain how all these pieces, Michel, Parmigiani, the component companies, and Sandoz all come together.
Well, Michel Parmigiani is the founder of the company, and I would synthesize he is a living legend of restoration. Imagine a guy, then he's 25 years old, in 1975, in the middle of the quartz crisis. He sees that the whole industry is going quartz. He feels that there is a lack and a risk of losing a cultural patrimony, which is the mechanical art, and he devotes his life to perpetuating that. 50 years later, UNESCO names the mechanical art a human patrimony. So the value of this man, this independent mind that he has, not following the flow, is in his persona. And probably what is interesting to understand, restoration is a cultural exercise, it's not a commercial exercise. And when you are restoring, to me, it's the black belt of watchmaking. You have to know everything about the industry, its history, every component you have to master, but not every component today, every component in each era in which it was built. So you can imagine the immense knowledge that this man has. And he started restoring ancient watches, and he got in touch with the Sandoz family, which is a very fortunate family in Switzerland, who has a beautiful and very vast collection of ancient watches, and he starts restoring all the watches. And also he restored an important part of the Patek Philippe Museum, so he's accredited as an official restorer by Patek. He made a name out of himself with this activity. The Sandoz family asked him if they wanted to do a brand together, and they would back him up. And this is the beginning of the story, and it was at the end of the quartz crisis, 1996. His mission was to re-educate, to state what a true traditional mechanical watch is about. And it's not only the mechanics, but it's also the finishing, the sensitivity to the aesthetics, and this flair now that you put into the watches that is emotional due to the craft and due to the respect of the tradition. But what is interesting to know is that Michel never looks at tradition as a cage. He looks at tradition and the art of watchmaking as a source of knowledge to move you forward. You might remember the Bugatti. The Bugatti watch was extremely innovative, but it was mechanically done in a very executive way, but it was revolutionary because when you're driving, you need to look at the watch with a different angle. So this was mechanically thought for an experience that was pure, that was luxury, that was executed through the mechanics.
It was a watch worthy of Bugatti.
Yes, and Bugatti of first years of the century. And the other very important thing of restoration, which is part of the etymology of the values of the brand, is that when you're working on restoration, you're working on somebody else's work. So this immense knowledge that you have, this talent that is exquisite, you have to disappear. So your ego, it doesn't exist because you're at the service of a customer who wants his original piece of another creator come back to life. So your passage shouldn't be seen. So great cultural knowledge, great sensitivity to finishing and to the mechanics, plus an ostentatiousness. These are the two founding values of the brand.
That's excellent. That's a great way of explaining it, because a lot of the best watchmakers historically do come from restoration. F.P. Journe, Denis Flageolet, Peter Speake-Marin, and of course Michel Parmigiani. So just out of curiosity, is there still a restoration department at the company?
Yes, there is, of course.
Actively restoring watches that are not Parmigiani watches?
Yes.
That's very cool. So now you have this constellation of workshops, some of which were founded by Michel Parmigiani, some of which were acquired. Explain to me what these component makers are, because most companies, if they're vertically integrated, they have everything under one roof, but your companies are quasi-independent as part of the group.
So as a restorer, Michel started thinking, I want to master my craft in my brand, and view that the foundation has almost infinite resources. They were very generous in the investment, and they started building a facility for movements. Before, the movements were called Parmigiani. And then the acquisition of the strategic components like case, dials, and then the creation of Atocalpa, which is even the regulating organ, because Michel was willing to have higher quality in that domain, and they started to invest in that too. So you can imagine that this industrial power was far over dimension for one brand. So at a certain point, I would say around 20 years ago, it was decided to open up this capacity to top brands in the industry, because an industrial capacity like that cannot be absorbed by a brand like Parmigiani. So it was decided to do spin-offs. So from Parmigiani, instead of having Parmigiani Movement, we started having a company called Vaucher that took the capacity of Parmigiani Movement and started its own manufacturing, and then Vaucher became probably one of the most valuable and qualitative movement builders in the industry, and serves an important brands in the industry. Atocalpa the same. I think in the Pôle Horloger there are around 45, 50 brands that are served.
So you will find Parmigiani Fleurier's constellation of suppliers contributing all over the industry, such as for a certain brand that makes racing machines for the wrist. But all of the parts that go into a Parmigiani watch, that's where all these companies come together and create a fully integrated manufactured product, even down to parts like regulating organ, cases, dials, movements. So that's sort of how the company works. It's a dispersed manufacture. Now let's talk a little bit about the watches on the table today. So a very heavy focus on Tonda PF, but the watch on your wrist and the watch that I'm holding right now is anything but a sports watch. Tell me a little bit about the new Quantième Perpetuel.
So the collection that we have built since the relaunch 2021, we started from the PF, the Tonda PF, which is a sports chic watch. I would say that it's probably the biggest segment in the watch industry. Then we did its sportier version, the PF Sport, and then the other big important domain is dress watches. And so last year we revisited the Toric, which was the collection that with which Michel started in 1996, and addressing it with a fresher and a very contemporary flair, but done with extraordinary finishings and very traditional finishings. This year we come with a new movement, which is a perpetual calendar that follows the philosophy of the brand to be very discreet, to be never loud, to be able to simplify almost the complication. And this comes also from the other movements that we've done in the past. So looking at a perpetual calendar, every time you look at a watch, whether it's a two-hand or whether it's a very big complication, there are only two hands that you really have to look at a glance, which is hour and minute, because that's what you're looking for to know what time it is. So this is your first degree of information, and in order to achieve that goal, the calendar information have to be placed a little bit in the background and in a position in which it doesn't interfere too much in the reading. That is why we did two coaxial information of the calendar, where you have at 8 o'clock the weekday, the day of the week, the day of the month, and at 4 o'clock you have the month and the 48 months that make the cycle of the 40 years of the leap year. And to place them in that position, if you trace a line from the PF logo to the center of the counter, you would see a perfect triangle.
Interesting.
And that is a way to aesthetically balance and cover the surface of the dial in a way which is pleasant to the eye. And this works only with this opening, because if you do a smaller opening, the counters cannot be changed in position, because the two pivots are the first constraint in design, even without knowing in which case they will be. That dimension of counters is perfect for this opening. You can't do it bigger, you can't do it smaller. Okay,
now what's interesting to me though is that a lot of people are going to ask, why are the counters dropped down below the hands? And so the reason is to create the equilateral triangle.
Yeah, which is a way to have a perfect filling of the surface, because if they would have been if they were at 9 o'clock, it will be unbalanced. Everything would have been on the top hemisphere of the dial, and you would have an empty feeling at 6 o'clock. So you would need to put something there. By placing them like this, you are purifying the function, you are simplifying the reading, and you have a pleasant, balanced harmony that is aesthetical, done technically.
And so this is a really fascinating watch, because this is, of course, the Toric case. If you've seen the chronograph owned by King Charles in Britain, you've seen the Toric case before. And so it's sort of like a classical Greek column that's been compressed into the form of a bezel. And then for good measure, you've got these wonderfully sharp breaks between the lug and the case, which is kind of a testament to the company's case craft, Les Arts Boîtiers, making the cases within the Parmigiani group. And then on the back, something that's associated maybe with a lot of Horlogerie, low volume independence, you've got a solid gold movement here. So it's not just that you've got a gold case, and this is actually considered to be the golden hour dial. Mr. Turner, he has the morning blue and platinum. So this is rose gold, that's platinum. 40.6 millimeters, so it's not small, it's not petite. It's got a nice size to it without being too big, and the standard of finish is really exquisite. And you got to tell me, where did this bridge finish come from? Because this pattern is not something I've seen on other watches.
This is called Tonda Fleurier. Michel had already done it on certain Qualité Fleurier movements of the past, but it was with a double size. It's a double Côte de Genève cross. So you have a Côte de Genève once and a 45-degree Côte de Genève again that crosses it on a path that is half of a Côte de Genève. So it gives you this texture feeling, which is extremely beautiful to see. And then you have the logo, which is applied like a cartouche that you do on a dial in full gold to give you this impression of richness. The double barrel, you know, well, that is a reason for longevity of the mechanic of the movement. You don't need the double barrel to store 60 hours of power reserve, but by the restoration work, Michel understood that a double barrel endures the life of the transmission, because the teeth of the wheels of the hour, the minutes and the seconds, they are not worn out by a release of the energy, which is less constant. The two barrels allowed a more homogeneous transfer of the energy to the transmission, and this warms out the teeth in a longer period of time. And all the gold movements have the signature of Michel. You see that there at 1 o'clock. So it's really a beautiful finishing, and the colimaçonnage of the barrels is also exquisite. The anglage with the sharp angles are done by hand on the bridges. So there's really a lot that goes on. And the same you could say on the dial, where you have a gold dial that is treated by hand in this grené finishing, which is an ancient finishing that Michel taught our dial maker, staying one day in the factory, and there's a woman who, with a brush, takes the gold and with a paste makes the surface become matte and granular. The thicker the brush is, the thinner the grains are, so you have a very soft, matte finishing done like this. Then you color it with the Pantone that you choose, and it's a PVD execution. And then you have to drill out the outline that you have outside, so you take away the color to make the gold come out again on the counters here. So everything is in the mass. It's an extremely delicate and extremely costly thing to do, but at the end, the effect is of an artisanal piece.
So it's a watch that's very impressive on both sides. And by the way, Mr. Fleurier was talking about the interior anglage of some of these steel bridges and half bridges. It's one thing to achieve a sharp inward angle on the exterior of a bridge, but when you have these confined spaces on steel, that's really a testament to the quality of what you get. Now, I understand that these are in some way limited editions, though.
Yes, 50 pieces each.
50 pieces each, and when is availability for these?
This will be on the market starting September.
So just think of this. Quality that's uncompromising, watches that are nicely sized, complications that are useful, and very rare. So now we're going to move, I guess, to some of the other, I would say, let's call them hybrid watches, somewhere between a dress watch and a sports watch. Now we have the Tonda PF Slate, and then we have the GMT Rattrapante, which is an interesting watch on the basis of having a combination of a second time zone and then a flyback mechanism to disappear the disparity between primary and secondary time. Now, this came out 2 years ago, but the new green dial is a 2025 debut. And then here we also have coloration of the movement of the Tonda PF skeleton. Let's talk for a moment about the skeleton. This is a really thin watch, 8.5 millimeters, 40 in diameter, 60-hour reserve, but how do you turn it green?
Well, there is, again, through physical vapor deposition, is the PVD treatment that is the color that is created through this technique that enhances the bridge's finishing, because there you have three finishings on the movement. You have on the upper surface a vertical brushing that is vertical following the watch's design, and then on the bottom you have a sandblasted, which is extremely matte, and on the anglage, so on the chamfering, you have a mirror polishing. So these three finishings are all on a monochromatic base, and you see that there's only green or white, so there's nothing that is overdone on the movement, because the movement has to be a background. Paradoxically, to do a nice skeleton, you have to tone down what you do on the movement in order to be fitting the watch. And so this is a limited edition of 50 pieces that will be on the market starting from May.
A very cool watch on a lot of levels. You know, some brands will say, look, we have an interior angle on the movement. I would exhaust myself trying to count all the interior angles on this movement. And sometimes green is not just green. As explained, there are different shades, partly due to the disparity in finishing techniques used. This is actually a very nuanced watch, and it's the kind of watch that I could see a man or a woman wearing. I don't see this as being like strictly a men's watch.
The comfort of that watch is incredible. So even if it's a 40 mm, it fits very well a wrist that is smaller. So you have ladies also willing to have this, but predominantly our brand is worn by men.
Now it's fascinating because I would call these Tonda PF watches something that's really a fusion of the Kalpa, the Tonda, and the Toric. A lot of the best elements of previous Parmigiani Fleurier design are evident in these, in the lugs, in the case, in the bezel.
Yep.
So it's sort of I would call it maybe a fusion style. Now what we'll do is we'll take a look at the Rattrapante. This is interesting because I guess the idea is to keep it as clean as possible.
Yes.
A lot of people are going to look at this online and say, that's not a GMT.
That's exactly that. The idea is, as I said, unostentatious. It's not a customer who is bragging about himself. So when you're at home, you don't need a GMT. You don't need to show that you're a traveler when you're at a restaurant. But when you are traveling, you want a flawless experience. So the function comes to life when you need it. And it has to be flawless in the sense that when you are traveling, the only thing that you have to change is the hour hand. The minute hand has to stay still. I hate to change the minute when I'm traveling, and so a dual time with a pusher was a must. And then the innovation is that the Rattrapante function, that in French means rattraper, means to catch up. So in English has been translated, in my opinion, changing the how do you say, the significance of that into split, no? Because you're putting the accent on the split function because you're separating the hands. But in French, you're putting the accent on reuniting the hands in rattraper. And you're reuniting with home, and we placed the Rattrapante function, so the split function, outside the chronograph for the first time in history of watchmaking on the hour hand. The split second function on the chronograph has been patented in 1827. So from 1827 to 2022, nobody thought about using that function outside the chronograph. And by placing it on the hour hand, you're going home the shortest way, because if you do 5, there you go. If you are, it goes clockwise. If it's 7 hours. Or if you do 5, it goes anti-clockwise.
It takes the shortcut.
It takes a shortcut, and everything that is separating you from home is in white. So the pusher at 8 o'clock is there for the comfort of pressing. If you're at 9 o'clock, you're already twisting yourself. Plus, it's beautifully into the lug, so it's also an aesthetic that is like this. And what is uniting you to home is gold. So the pusher in the Rattrapante crown. And what is home time is gold, because gold is your precious, most precious thing you have. So that's how we came up with this beautiful.
What do you call this treatment of the dial?
The dial is a guilloche handmade. It's a barleycorn creativity. You said, how did we do this fresh style being so Parmigiani? The guilloche is part of Parmigiani's history. Michel was a lover of Breguet. I think his mentor was Breguet. But the guilloche done in a classic way brings you back to an old-fashioned mode. So it's not suited for today's world in a sports chic watch. So what we did was to miniaturize the pattern in something that was almost a texture. You can, from far away, you probably see it as a plain dial, but in reality it's not. It's subtly there, and when you play with the light, you enjoy that there's something more, there's something qualitative there. And again, the logo, as I said, is for the others, so we put this beautiful PF logo, which is a seal that was created by Michel to pass the custom, because when you're passing a custom with a gold watch, the custom has to repair who is the builder of the case in gold to assess that the invoice is correctly reporting how many grams, etc. And he did it aesthetically, and that logo was hidden. It was in the oscillating mass. It was on the crowd. It was not evident. By placing it at 12 o'clock, you are stating subtly the brand without being literal for a customer that it has to be.
And that's wonderful, because it seems like everyone else is making the logo bigger every single year. So it's a bit refreshing. And I would also say that a lot of these Tonda PF watches, they are remarkably water resistant for your for the class. Like this is an ultra thin skeleton watch, but you can swim with this. So these are genuinely redoubtable sports watches. You can be fine and still tough at the same time. Beauty and the beast, so to speak. A really cool watch on a lot of levels. Micro rotor automatic now. Parmigiani has several different automatic mechanisms. What you just saw was the center rotor. This is a micro rotor, so despite being a complication and automatic, it manages to remain fairly thin. And the lug profiles have always been highly ergonomic at Parmigiani. These are no exception. Probably one of the few full bracelet sports watch families that actually wears true to its rated size and not a size or two larger.
One thing that is difficult to convey is the comfort. When you have a watch like this on your wrist, it doesn't drop.
Yeah.
And the bracelet is following your skin, and it's not the skin that adapts to your bracelet. Semi-rigid bracelets are designed statistically on a statistical curve. So they bend at the inside in a way which is fixed at a certain point. When you have a bracelet that is able to do this.
Yeah, when the lug can pull straight down out of the, or the bracelet can pull straight down out of the lug, I should say. Oh yeah. It's like an accordion.
So basically, there's a moment in which your watch has to do this. When you're wearing the watch here, you can't have a semi-rigid bracelet would create some space. there. And the comfort of this is following your wrist. I have a 17.5 centimeter wrist, inch wrist, excuse me, and you probably have the same, but I have probably a bone sticking out, you don't. So everything has to be adapted to your body. It's not your body to be adapted to the watch. And this is incredibly comfortable.
And I agree with you on that. It's often the case that with this type of watch, you have a bracelet that's very rigid. As Mr. Turney was describing, they have sort of a fixed curvature. That's why we use large pillows inside the watches at our company that have that kind of bracelet, so the bracelet doesn't get bent beyond its physical limits. When you have a bracelet that is this flexible, that can actually lie flat, you don't have that same damage potential that it might kink or hyperextend or permanently warp itself. So it's not just an ergonomic standpoint, it's actually a durability question and something that's important for long-term ownership. Okay, so now we're gonna take a little bit of a departure from the
Probably
world.
wanna
Oh,
start-
we can, sure. I guess it
finish
makes
the
sense.
PF.
Finish PF, go with the PF chronograph right here. 40 millimeters, blue dial, manufacturer movement. Pretty exciting watch. Tell me a little bit about this and how you made a decision to go without the date.
The date was a debate that we started last year with the micro rotor and golden sienna. When we came out in 2021, the dial had the PF at 12 o'clock and the date at 6 o'clock of the micro rotor. We were not ready to have taken out even the date because this purity grows on you. It's crazy. So when it came out like this, we already had some customers in the social media saying, "Oh, beautiful watch, but you could have taken out even the date." So a debate started there already, and so we did last year the test. We came up with a no date function on the micro rotor, and it was extremely well received and successful. On the chrono is even more evident because it allows you to have a perfect symmetry, and you don't have an element at 4 o'clock. So the purity of the execution is even more correct, if I may. But when we did it in 2021 in 42 mm, we had already the movements with the date in stock, so it was a sort of a constraint of the stock that we had. So by taking out the date and by reducing by 2 millimeters the dimension, we have enhanced the elegance, and the dimension also is extremely more comfortable to wear. And it also allows us to separate better the PF from the PS Sport, where the PF Sport is slightly bolder in a 42 mm.
Now, it's a fascinating watch on a lot of levels because back a little less than a decade ago, a little bit less than a decade, Parmigiani through Fleurier launched the Seed VMF 6710 high-beat chronograph, and a lot of that technology finds its way here. You've got the column wheel, you've got the vertical clutch, you've got the 5 hertz, that's 10 beats per second, you've got a 65-hour power reserve, you've got a chronometer certification. The movement is large, it's properly sized for the case. The pusher feel for the chronograph is exemplary, as good as anything in the business, and the level of decoration is quite impressive. It's a full balance bridge, it's free sprung. Technically, it is bleeding edge in terms of all the features you want on a modern chronograph, and it's quite nicely decorated.
Yeah.
For a non-limited edition, this is pretty impressive.
It's an impressive chronograph, extremely well made, very reliable. I think it's one of the best chronos in the industry.
And also 100 meters?
Also, everything is crewed and 100 meter depth on the PF, with the exception of the Rattrapante, because when you have the
coaxial pusher,
you cannot have the screwed, and that's 60 meters, so you can swim easily with it, but it's 60, not 100.
So you've got a lot of interesting variations on the
And
theme.
here, there's one thing that you might have not
one more.
noticed.
Let's go
If
for
you
it.
twist the watch, look at the oscillating mass in gold, and look at that logo there. What do you notice?
It almost looks like an R, or it disappears.
In the logo, you have the P and the F,
Oh yeah, I was going to say
and
they're
they're not-
superimposed.
and they're not touching the ellipse.
Oh my goodness!
How does it stay?
It's so fine that I didn't even notice it.
You
Pretty
have
impressive.
You have an ellipse of sapphire in the oscillating mass, and that's a dial technique where you set the P and the F, as you set 2 indexes, and to get to that perfection of the logo and to have a see-through oscillating mass that does not cover the movement so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you've created a sapphire panel the size of a Tic Tac,
Exactly.
and it's in a Tic Tac.
So when you ask a producer of masses, can you do flat? Of course I can. Then you ask him to set the sapphire, which is really flat. You understand that flat is a word that not everybody sees it the same. It took us 4 months to do the quality check of that mass in 2021.
And that's what people want to hear, that time was spent on their watch, because it's a big purchase.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of validation, some companies talk about how they test watches before they ship, number of days, number of positions. What does quality control look like for an outbound watch at Parmigiani Fleurier? What kind of testing is done before it's sent to the dealer or the client?
Well, of course, the movements are extremely tested by Vaucher, that they have probably. I don't know if you have already visited the manufacturing of Vaucher or not.
Am I invited?
Of course.
I'll take you up on that.
Yes, that is a very important experience, because there you have really a quality approach up front, and the movements are extremely reliable. And then on our side, of course, we test the habillage, so the dials, the cases, all the fitting, and the quality of our watches are really, I would say,
excellent.
Excellent.
Okay, now let's finish up here. We have the Tonda PF. This is now a sport chronograph.
Yes.
Tell me about what this Surmet case is. How is this different from the Surmet we've been seeing for at least 10, 15 years from other brands?
This is a patent that conveys to the material a very metallic lust. You have a reflection of the light, which is extraordinary, and the color is unprecedented, because it's not anthracite or dark or black, but it is a tone of gray, and the power of this reflection is such that if you are under a blue sky, you would see blue on your case, and it really lives with the ambit. And to get to that level of color, it's in the composition of the composite, which is done with 32% of atomic presence of titanium, and also the composite presents itself as beads that are filtered to have the smallest one, most homogeneous. Then they are compressed and heated to crystallize and make the material. Then the other thing is that it, compared to other cermet, is less hard, in order to be able to be worked with the finishing that you see.
So it can be decorated like metal.
Yes, well, you need diamond toolings that are extremely hard to attack this unscratchable material. And to do this world first, because nobody ever did a case in cermet fully. Usually you have either a central part of the case or a bezel, but never a full body case. Due to the complexity of the design, it is decomposed in 14 different components that are mounted together to make this design. And that gives you a feeling of a luxury, a feeling of sophistication, something that is not dull and banal. We're never about that, but still brings the elegance of Parmigiani in a more sportier, if you want, domain.
So, assuming that all of these are going to hit the market at roughly the same time, when can we expect to see these novelties generally? So
this will be started to be shipped in June. So June, July, you will see it on the market. September is for the chrono perpetual calendar. We'll start shipping in May the skeleton, and in April the GMT Rattrapante and the chronograph.
Excellent. And so I'm just going to note, mechanically, the 42 Surmet is the same as the 40. They have all the same refinements. They have all the same capabilities. They are aesthetically different. And if you really hate scratches, Surmet might be the way to go. Sir, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Tim.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.